Subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to get all the latest updates. As the Army Chief is in Leh on a 2-day visit, something has certainly shifted on the ground in eastern Ladakh. I would call it a different strategic response from India. We know now from multiple sources that Indian forces moved preemptively to take the heights south of the strategic Pangong Tso lake. And we also know, and we are able to piece together, that talks have hit a dead end. So what are we really looking at, even with this altered Indian response to which the Chinese have responded? So clearly, the Indians have managed to touch a nerve. We have managed to touch a nerve. Are we looking at a protracted conflict, or with tens of thousands of Indians and Chinese troops eyeball to eyeball, are we close to the precipice of war? On the program today, let me introduce a very eminent panel. We have General Satish, General Hasnain, Ambassador Singh, and we also have with us a Tibetan activist, Tenzing Tsundue. And this becomes relevant because one of our soldiers who's been martyred in a landmine is a part of the covert special forces that have been raised from mostly Tibetans, making its own powerful point to the Chinese. I'll start with you, General Hasnain. Something has shifted, and I'll ask you this every time we talk about China, because you were sanguine when we began. You thought talks would work. Talks have clearly not worked. And in the words of an official in the government who was talking to me, he said, we have shown the Chinese India is willing to lose blood and draw blood. We may be the underdog, but we're the fighting dog.
Thank you, Barkha. Thank you for having me on this show. And I'll make one correction in your observation. I've always said talks will go on. Talks may not succeed. I've not necessarily said they will succeed. But talks will go on. And talks and engagement on the ground between troops can both go on simultaneously. It happens everywhere in the world. It's happening in Afghanistan at the moment. It happened in Vietnam for a couple of years.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't mean that if things are changing on the ground, we are heading to war immediately. Of course, I still do believe that a trigger is required. It's an incendiary situation, and it just needs a trigger. It needs a spark, and there can be a tremendous, outburst suddenly.
Yeah.
That is not something which anyone is looking for. I don't think the Chinese are looking for that. I don't think we are looking for that. We are looking at a period up to November, perhaps both sides. I think the Chinese were essentially looking for an exit strategy with honor, which was not available to them. They did not want to sound or seem to the world that they are drawn back under Indian coercion and under Indian pressure, right? So they held on. They kept on dilly-dallying on the tops, and they held on the ground. The Indian side, our side, has gone and changed the ground situation, which is very, very good. And we've done it in both the sides, the North Pangong Tso and the South Pangong Tso. The South Pangong Tso, where we are very strongly entrenched in the Chushul heights, we've changed the ante there. We've gone and occupied certain heights in a very, very fuzzy perception of the LSE. No one can accuse us of going across or remaining on our side or whatever it is. On the North Pangong Tso, we have gone and not recaptured ground, but we have gone and substantially gone to a position of advantage, to a place of domination. I think overall the situation has changed, not to our favor completely, but definitely a far, far better tactical operational situation on the ground.
General Hasnain, briefly before I go to General Dua, you still believe that the Chinese would look for an exit strategy, a face saver. But what could that possibly be? Because it is the Chinese who actually moved into what are called the gray zones along the line of actual control, where before this face-off, our side would patrol till their side would patrol till, but would patrol, you would not park. The face-off began because the Chinese started building infrastructure, mobilizing troops, building even helipads from what we get from sources. What could this face saver be? Why do you think this will cool down in November? One, of course, is the onset of winter, but other than that.
You see, Barkha, if the Chinese really mean business to do something on the ground, to capture substantial territory, substantial pieces of ground somewhere, they wouldn't come with this kind of strength that they have come with. The report strength is still about 40,000 troops. That's about all which is there. To build up a local superiority, that itself is not sufficient. It's about 2.5 divisions worth. We've got 3.5, 4 divisions there. So I still think the Chinese overplayed their hand. They thought that they could coerce us. We did not get coerced, right? And we made it sure that we built up our defense. We have now gone and entrenched ourselves well. We have built ourselves up for winter. We have clearly conveyed the message strategically to them that we will stick on and we will fight it out. This is making them very uncomfortable. Now they have to decide. Are they going to go to all-out war as against the entire, should I say, against the desires of the whole world who are looking at this situation with a tremendous focus at the moment? The Chinese don't want to be painted black in the situation of black and white.
Okay. General Dua, do you share General Hasnain's optimism? Now, of course, the shift in the Indian strategic response on the ground is very, very apparent. The fact that we move preemptively, the fact that we move near features like Rezangla, Rekinla, we have that information. We have it reliably from multiple sources. That's why I'm mentioning it. One person even called it India doing a China on China, because these are exactly the games that China has been playing, and now we preempted it, right? But how do you come back from the brink? And is this not evidence? Is this not evidence that all the talks, whether at the level of the brigadiers, whether at the military to military level, and whether at the diplomatic to diplomatic level, have essentially failed? So I just don't see the face saver. I don't know what this face saver is that can emerge. It looks to me that we are perilously close to conflict.
Barkha, you started by asking me, do I agree with the perception that General Hasnain is painted? I think the short answer is totally, period.
Okay.
But having said that, let me say, you asked a question earlier also as to what can that face saver be? And since we are talking hypothetically here, let's say we have 4 areas that we've had these face-offs and inflection points. At one place, if we were to agree to the Chinese and they say, okay, we will disengage from place A, if on place B you agree to this, because everything is happening in the zone of that where there is some ambiguity on the LAC. Now that kind of saver, what they were looking for, is not happening. India has very resolutely not only stood, I mean, I'm sure Ambassador Casey will talk about it later. There are other measures that have been taken beyond the military field. Which only India has done. The world has been talking about it, but only India has actually taken some action, right? And so to that extent, and I go back to the CDSs and the chief's statement saying military options, we are ready for all military options, and there was a lot of brouhaha about it. Well, what else can the military do? Military is ready for all the military options. I'm not going to repeat what General Hasnain spoke about, how well prepared our military is, both in terms of military deployments in numbers and as well as logistically. Now we seem to be in a better position. The tactical advantages that we have gained over the past 3 or 4 days, some things have come out in the press. It is not in national interest that everything comes out in the press. And I think we should resist from trying to do that on social media or media, like some of the media channels are getting into. But the fact is, something has changed. You started off your introduction by talking about it. Something has changed in the overall thing that China thought maybe, just maybe, India will back down, if not now, at some point of time. So on both counts, it is falling low. I will not delve into other measures other than military. There are other better suited speakers for that. And so I think as of now, we have, I won't say rested the initiative, but now we are in much better place than we were, say, a couple of months ago.
So this is very interesting because both of you as generals, as soldiers on the ground have vast amounts of experience, and both of you are reflecting that India is now perhaps approaching the Chinese from a position of strength and not just from a position of defending territory. And I think that's a key change. And B, you believe that the Chinese are looking for a face saver. Ambassador Casey is saying, looking at the diplomatic fault lines, do you agree? Or is China making full use of the fact that the Americans are distracted? They're going to be distracted till a new administration is in place. The world is distracted by this coronavirus pandemic, which also links back to China in many ways for its non-transparency on the virus. China has declared that it now has the largest sort of navy globally. China is going to make a play for setting up military logistical bases in other countries, like Sri Lanka, for example, where it has long thrown money at the problem in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, in Nepal, in Bhutan. How do you see what's happening on, sir? And how do you read this shift, as we're all calling it?
Firstly, you're absolutely correct that the Chinese have chosen this moment because there's a lot of geopolitical strategic ambiguity and vacuum at the moment. And remember, 1962 also, they chose the moment because you had the Cuban Missile Crisis. So the Soviets, the Americans were completely preoccupied with Cuba. And they chose that moment of distraction to come in. And now, in addition, there's pandemic. But I see three levels. One is the political level, then there is the military and the geopolitical. The political level is that you talked of a face saver. Don't forget that what triggered this is what the Chinese reaction after we abrogated Article 370 last year in August. There was a very strong reaction from China saying this impinges on a territorial integrity. Don't forget that they have not intervened in Arunachal. They have not intervened in any other place. They've only intervened in Ladakh. So there is a purpose behind it. Then on August 29, just a few days back, President Xi took a meeting and very strong statement has come out. He says it has to be Fortress Tibet. So complete annexation and assimilation of Tibet culturally, religiously, etc. They are not going to keep this fiction of allowing at least some leeway available to the Buddhists there. So there is a larger perception in the Chinese mind. And this is consolidation of power by Xi. This is power display, not only here. He's annexed Hong Kong. He's pressing in the South China Sea. So there is muscle flexing. And this is happening as he prepares in October for the 5th plenum of his current term. And last year in the plenum, his term limit was lifted. So he can carry on beyond 2 terms. And this is where he'll be presenting to the 400 odd members of the Central Committee his plans for the future. Now, he cannot be facing an embarrassment vis-a-vis India. So I don't know what his plan was. His plan was to stymie India, embarrass India. There's a Chinese phrase where they said, skin the cat to frighten the monkeys. So were they fighting the monkeys in the ASEAN, that we can do this to India, and then etc. Now, next is the military one. Now, obviously, with 2 nationalist leaders, President Xi and Prime Minister Modi, there was going to be very little let because domestic politics is involved. So why the timing now? I'm sure India could have done it 10 days earlier. Of course, we would have had 2 considerations. One is the parliament session coming up within 10 days. Even though you can take the question hour away, but opposition would have protested like hell to say, what have you done about the Chinese? They're sitting on Indian land. And second is, of course, as I said, on the plenum side, the Chinese have their deadline where they have to be meeting, making their presentation. So there's domestic politics.
So let me ask you though briefly, do you believe that the Chinese then, if this is Xi Jinping being expansionist and playing to domestic politics, do you believe that he'd be looking for a face saver? Because the Chinese end game is less than clear. It's not clear to anybody right now what the end game is.
Well, it could be multiple things, but I think therefore, so what did India need to do? Now, we have done exactly what the military has done, because you had 2 options, you had 3 options. One is to just accept the status quo and say, okay, kiss and make up. Second was do a frontal assault on the intrusions, which doesn't make military sense because they're already well entrenched. You may succeed, there'll be tremendous loss of life. And third was you do counter intrusions. So which means if they have come up to what are their claim lines, then you go to your claim lines. You know, after all, that ambiguity has always been there. So today, the reaction of the Chinese Foreign Ministry is very interesting. They said, you're calling it a preemptive action. This is the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Now, therefore, you have crossed the line of actual control. But hey, so have you. If you can come up to your line of actual control or imagined control, actually it shouldn't be called LAC. It should be called LIC. It's line of imagined control. So there's a huge gray area where we've been patrolling, say, till finger 8. And they say they are till finger 4. Now, if they are coming to 4, the heights that we are now controlling, just very quickly, the heights that we are now controlling, that are putting them in a very difficult situation, because that is what is, during 62, they had intruded there in what is called the Spangor Gap. So we are now controlling the heights there. So therefore, when you sit down at the table now, the military is able to give you pieces to exchange, rather than simply saying, hey guys, there are these 5 agreements, let's abide by them.
And that last point makes a lot of sense, because that can create a framework for what both the generals have called a face-saving formula. You know, the military has given you that context to negotiate at that table from a position of strength, and at least of equality. Now, I want both the generals to respond with brief comments at the moment, because I want the Tibet factor to be discussed and I want Tenzin to talk about that. So I'll just allow both of you 30-second rebuttals for the moment, and we'll come back for more detailed responses later. General Hasnain, what next?
What next? This situation is going to remain for some time, and I think the Chinese are essentially looking at winter. Possibly, look, the assessment going on in the media elsewhere is that something like 1962, will they try and trigger off something in the late October so that they can achieve a military tactical advantage somewhere along the heights, etc. We have to be very careful about that. We may ourselves take advantage of this situation and possibly occupy certain areas which we assess that the Chinese may like to try and transgress. So this little bit of a give and take will continue from now till November. This area receives a fair amount of snow. Temperatures come down to 40 to 45 degrees minus out here. I've stayed here in the winter. I know this place very well. Fighting in the winter is difficult, but still possible. So one thing in our mind, we should be very clear. It's not as if fighting will come to an end or grabbing situations, exploiting will come to an end after November. That may continue. And we are therefore looking at a long face-off.
A long face-off, not an eruption of war in the sense that we understand it, is really what you're saying. General Dua, quickly, and then I want Tenzin to come in on the Tibet factor. General Dua.
If you're asking me to start by crystal grazing, like you asked, if there were any easy answers, we would have resolved the issue by now. So there are no easy answers.
Fair enough.
But the tactical, strategic, I have an advantage. General Hasnain is senior to me. He's already laid out on the table what militarily what can happen. But the fact of the matter is also that if we are going to mix the two, we have some advantage that has been established. So perhaps it will also now lead. I mean, if we are going only militarily, it might happen that we might look for more than 1 points of advantage. That might lead to some other issues, and that might lead to some, there could be inadvertent clashes. And like we're talking of a strategic situation, this is the era of strategic corporals. I go back to a Gulf or scenario that I'm in general, I don't recall whom. We all have to be cautious. A small situation in the battlefield can lead to a bigger ramification. This is not like World War II. This is not like 71. Oh, we won't do it in April. We'll do it in December. It may not be the time and place of your choosing. So it's a very delicately poised thing. Let's not just talk loosely about only battles and only talks. Both will have to go hand in hand. And I think there is a lot of sense in that. But last sentence, the military has to give more than 1 point of advantage on the table.
Very, very succinctly put, General Dua. I think very clear now. I want all of you to stay on. I know, General Hasnain, you have to go, but maybe we can get at least a last word from you. Tenzin, the Special Frontier Force, very covert, hardly spoken about, has come to light because one of its brave men has been martyred in a landmine blast. And we've all seen the pictures now draped in 2 flags, the Tibet that he dreamt of being his homeland, and the India that is his adopted homeland. Talk a little bit about the feeling today in the Tibetan community, Tenzin. I know you're in Dharamshala right now, so I'll hand it to you.
Yes. So Nyima Tenzin, age 51, had served in the Special Frontier Force for 33 years. He is a resident of Tibetan settlement in Ladakh. And along with him, one young Javan at the age of 24 has been injured and is being treated. And he's also part of the Tibetan refugee camp in Ladakh. As a Tibetan who is born in India, I am sad that a Tibetan died, but I'm proud that a Tibetan gave his life for his second homeland, which is India. Special Frontier Force was first set up in 1962 and since then has done amazing, so much work. It's actually the, war horse work in Indian Army, but has always been called the classified warriors in the Indian Army, directly under PMO, but set up by RAW, and has done so much work from Kargil War right down in the beginning of 1971, Bangladesh Liberation War, 1984, again, in Kargil region and has been managing the Siachen Glacier and points in Chushu where the recent clash happened, and also points of border in Sikkim and also in Arunachal. So Tibetans have done this so much, but this has always been called the secret regiment in the Indian Army, and therefore, as a Tibetan, for the first time, there is some recognition. And this recognition is mainly because they secured a victory when there is something difficult.
I'll just link up. I was doing Barkha once.
So this is what we are seeing today. So it's a moment of pride for the Tibetan refugees that India, the country of our refuge, we have been able to do something for India. And this is the country that had given refuge to His Holiness the Dalai Lama when we are in exile and when entire Tibet region is under Chinese occupation. One small point I wanted to make here: I still feel, though both the generals spoke from tactical military point of view, I still feel India is dealing with China from a weak point. And I know you've spoken, the two generals spoken from tactical military point of view, but I need one immediate thing that India need to do is to say that China is launching all these attacks from occupied Tibet. Now, this will put China immediately in a difficult situation where they will lose the ground underneath their feet, and suddenly entire region of Tibet is under question. And because China has been questioning Aksai Chin, Arunachal Pradesh, in so many places, we need to put entire region of Tibet in question and therefore say Tibet is an occupied country. China is attacking India from all these places.
Very passionately spoken. I just want to get both the generals to make closing comments. You could respond to what you've heard Tenzin say, or you could look at the overall picture. And I'll just add one question. One government official described the situation in Ladakh as the new Siachen. And he argued that just like in Siachen in 1984, you did not necessarily think that there would be a permanent militarization. Here we are in Siachen. Are we now looking at the complete militarization of the high Himalayas? General Hasnain, I'll start with you, because the trust deficit is so much that even if that face saver for the Chinese is put on the table, the Indians may never believe this enough to ever take back their men now. Our men.
Am I to go first?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, Barkha, that's a very interesting question and a very fascinating analogy. Of course, the military works based upon a geopolitical situation which works out ultimately on the ground to a strategic, operational, and tactical situation. This is exactly what happened in Siachen. We went and occupied it early because we anticipated that Pakistan would probably occupy it. Here, Eastern Ladakh, the Chinese have come and occupied certain areas because we trusted them till that time. We did not occupy that area in strength, so we were not in a position to respond immediately at that particular time. Now that we have gone and entrenched ourselves strongly in a position there, and the Chinese cannot, although in some places they could still possibly by subterfuge probably be able to move in, we can equally do the same. So the situation is quite akin to Siachen, there is no doubt. But the permanence part of it is the important aspect. Will the Chinese stay on out here and want to continue militarizing Eastern Ladakh? They could very well do it to some other areas. They could extend this into Himachal, into Uttarakhand, take it to Arunachal year on year differently. But Ladakh seems to be very important, particularly from the angle of Gilgit-Baltistan, China-Pakistan economic corridor, the connect from Siachen to Eastern Ladakh. All this is putting Ladakh into a completely different perspective. And therefore, I do tend to agree that there is a danger of a near permanent deployment of the Indian Army facing the Chinese, the PLA, in Ladakh.
All right, General Hasnain, I'll say thank you to you because I know you have to move on to another program. General Dua, quick last word to you, and I'll ask Tenzin. I think today we can give the Tibetans the Tibetan community the last word. But General Dua, to Tenzin's point here, that make the larger point about Tibet being occupied, go more aggressive on Tibet, on which India has sometimes gone 2 steps forward, 1 step back. What do you say? Has that game now changed permanently? Will that strategy change permanently?
It may be early for us to say will that change permanently. some changes will take place in not only in military, as we were talking about the deployments to General Hasnain, some changes will take place there also, whether it's going to be total forward deployment or whether it's going to be like Siachen. No two situations can be same. Similarly, in this issue, whether, like Tenzin very passionately said, we should declare Tibet, whole Tibet as an occupied territory. Now, I suppose they have so many factors. India will have to be a little more pragmatic, and there will be so many more factors than just a military sort of a situation in Ladakh, because we have a stated position, which was in return for some other stated position from the other side. So there is a little house of cards there, and a lot of things are going to get impacted, not only because of Ladakh, but because of already some of the steps that have been taken by India. Some steps are being forced on by the rest of the world, global community, for other reasons, other things that are happening, which are not necessarily connected to Ladakh, but are certainly connected to China. So all in all, that remains to be seen. I would like to end by saying that things will change, both at the LAC, that is line of actual control. So actual control will start, that jostling will start. In the geopolitical situation also, some things will change. What will change will remain to be seen. Thank you, Barkha.
All right, thank you. Very circumspect, General. Yes, General, thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thank you for I think all of you have shed a lot of perspective. We'll say thank you to you very much for joining us. Tenzin, I'll give you the last word. Go ahead and talk a little bit about the sentiment I know among the Tibetans.
Well, I think it is not just the sentiment. Entire Tibetan community, both inside Tibet and also in India. For us, the ultimate goal is the independence of Tibet. And we know we will achieve it. It's just that it has just started to begin with China picking up fights with entire world community, both by disease and also by war and territorial incursions that China is doing. And the reason why I was earlier proposing that India should recognize the entire region of Tibet as occupied country is because China has never respected India's national integrity. India always thought that there is this thing called one China policy, one India policy. But China took India to United Nations on Kashmir. China invaded parts of Ladakh. China has always questioned Arunachal Pradesh and also Sikkim. China has been instigating Nepal against India. China has done everything possible to really nudge India and has questioned India's integrity. But by then, why are we still accommodating Chinese criticism? Is it because we are afraid of China? Or is it because we still think this thing the generals talk about, that the trust factor? No, India has no trust on China. China also has no trust on India. What has been happening is politics, the politics of small benefits of investments or some possible handshakes and that kind of thing. All that is now being unmasked. There is no trust between India and China, and now is the time to really attack China where it's weak, and weakness of China is Tibet, because China knows it is Tibet from where the real unfurling really tumbling down of Chinese cards can begin only from Tibet, because the Tibetans have been holding on for the past 70 years with the dream of ultimate independence. And once Tibet set up this, Mongolians will pick up, Uyghur East Turkestan will pick up, and all these three occupied countries put together make 60% of China's landmass. China is really afraid of Tibetans, and therefore Tibetans have been able to do this clinch, this victory against China, which India has not been able to do. This is the time where India and China can come together, put a united fight against the Chinese.
Okay, Tenzin, I think that's spoken with a lot of passion, but one thing I will say that unlike previous times, something has permanently shifted in the India-China equation. So I think you have more basis this time, perhaps, for your optimism. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on our program.
Thank you.